This is Focus on Africa. I'm Laquesta Burak. Our top stories. There are reports that Mali's president has been arrested hours after a mutiny at a military barracks near the capital, Bamako. Sudan's Prime Minister tells the BBC of the challenges still ahead, a year on from signing an historic peace-sharing arrangement.
This transition is probably one of the most challenging and complex transitions in our history.
South Africa eases one of the world's toughest coronavirus lockdowns, with alcohol back on sale again for the first time in weeks. Also in the programme, not hitting the mark, the UK students who say their lives have been turned upside down over an algorithm error in their final qualifications. Hello, and thank you for joining us on Focus on Africa, coming to you from BBC World News. Well, we start with a developing story today because the AFP and Reuters news agencies are reporting that the president of Mali, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, has been arrested by soldiers. Now, this comes just hours after a military spokesman confirmed that shots had been fired inside an army base near the capital, Bamako. Now, it's been quite a busy day. There's been a midst of political crisis in the country itself. There have been growing calls for the president to step down. And the reason, well, people are angry at the jihadist and intercommunal violence, as well as the government's handling of its economy. OK, we're going to try and get a firmer handle on what is going on the ground, but there have been problems trying to communicate with local journalists due to connectivity issues. So we're joined now by our expert here from BBC Afrique, Nicolas Negos. Nicolas, thank you for joining us. Like I said, a very confusing picture because of connectivity, as you'd expect in situations like this. But just update us with what we do know.
What we do know is that the President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and also his Prime Minister have been arrested, according to the chief of the mutiny. The events happened earlier today at Kati, a city located at 15 kilometers from Bamako. People reported gunshots, and finally the situation was a bit confusing. We had in our French program today an analyst from Bamako who was due to explain to us what was happening, but finally, because of connectivity problems, as you mentioned, we couldn't get him anymore.
How significant is this, Nicolas? How significant is a move like this?
It's really important, especially because political disputes have been happening in Mali for the past years. 8 years ago, former President Amadou Toumani Touré was ousted after 10 years in power. He had to flee to neighboring Senegal. What's happening today looks a little bit like that. It means it's because in June you have the Mouvement du 5 Juin, which is a coalition with civil society, but also opponents, asking for President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to quit. And what is important, you mentioned the insecurity, the jihadists, the rebels who took the north of the country in 2012, but there's also growing anger about the results of the legislative elections who took place in March and April. Opponents are accusing the President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta to have stolen the election and to have put his favorite candidate in the parliament.
Now, you know what's really interesting, because in the last hour, in fact, we've been watching this in the newsroom, yourself and myself, and there's been reaction from the international community, particularly from the likes of France, who have condemned it. ECOWAS have condemned it, saying, you know, the soldiers need to get back to their barracks. But, I mean, look at the pictures that we can see on the screen now. It looks relatively calm. People appear to be celebrating. In terms of an international presence in the country, how significant is this?
It's really important because, as I was telling you, because of the crisis, the insecurity problems in Mali, you have one of the biggest UN mission in this country. And it hasn't been easy for them to work. Why? Because since they arrived in Mali, Malians were expecting so much from them. And they see that the rebels are still there, the jihadists are still carrying on. The north and also the east of the country are difficult to access. So they were already organizing demonstrations to ask the international peacekeeping mission and also the French soldiers to leave the country. Now it's going to become a little bit more difficult, especially because the population also think that the international presence in Mali follows an agenda set by the government.
Okay, very quickly. Imam Dicko is a name that we're hearing a lot about. Who is he?
Imam Dicko is the leader of the coalition of the opposition called Mouvement du 5 Juin, meaning in English, yeah. Movement of the 5th June. He's really important, but he already said that he's not going to run for candidate as a candidate for the presidential election in 2023, that his role is to help the society to be better and for the peace to come back in the country.
Nicola Nichols, thank you very much indeed for that. So just to remind you, AFP and Reuters news agencies confirming that the President, Keita of Mali, has been arrested by soldiers. More as and when we get it. In the meantime, it's a year to the day since an historic power-sharing agreement was signed between the military and civilians in Sudan. After the fall of President Omar al-Bashir, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is heading a transitional government charged with steering Sudan to democratic elections come 2022. But in an exclusive interview, he told the BBC's Zainab Badawi that a 30-year legacy of repression can't be put right overnight.
Transitions are always messy. They are non-linear. They never travel in the same way. And this transition is probably one of the most challenging and complex transitions in our history. We had 2 or 3 transitions before, but this is the most complex one. We are working on what we call the Sudanese model, which is a partnership between the civilian and the military. And I think it is working well. We are very realistic about it. There are some challenges and problems and all that, but by and large, we are making headways and we are working within that confinement and within that partnership in an excellent fashion, addressing all the challenges that are facing us together.
But obviously not everybody is happy. In March, you survived an assassination attempt when the convoy you were travelling in was nearly blown up. How shaken were you by that, and do you know who was responsible?
Yes, we started the process long back of addressing and having an investigation on that assassination attempt. It is, of course, we know so well, coming from the operatives of the former dictatorship. We've arrested some people and the investigation is continuing. We're getting some support and help from outside. COVID also derailed this process a little bit, but we are working on that, and I think this will never derail us from continuing and working forward in the interest of our people.
A Sudanese legal expert, Wael Ali Said, says Sudan still has more work to abolish Bashir-era restrictions on personal freedoms and adopt international treaties and standards on the respect for human and civil rights. You've got a lot more to do, haven't you, to try to undo what the regime did?
This is a 30 years of legacy. You cannot undo it overnight. We believe strongly we are moving in the right direction. We started by repealing those repressive laws. We went even further to repeal all the laws that restricting religious freedom, human rights, and all this. We think we are moving in the right direction, but the road is a long road, and we are determined to get there.
There are a lot of conservative elements in Sudan, many who supported the Islamism of Omar al-Bashir. And the National Congress Party, Bashir's former ruling party, says that there is now a battle between the secularists and Islam in Sudan, and it's urging their supporters to go out on the streets. You've got a big problem on your hands.
Zainab, these are the distraction issues. We are not bothered with that. Abdul Hayy and his likes, these are a small minority. You can see the number of demonstrations that they call during the last few weeks. And so the Sudanese people have come of age. They know so well what are their real battles and what are their real problems and challenges.
The US government has issued sanctions against 4 Ugandans, 2 of them are judges, for alleged involvement in an international illegal adoption scheme. The move by the US follows the conviction of an American, Robin Longoria, in August of last year over 30 illegal adoptions from Uganda between 2013 and 16. Now, the sanctions cover both financial and travel restrictions. Patricia Oyela reports now from Kampala.
The US government says many children were victimized by the illegal adoption scheme. Bribes were allegedly paid to steer cases towards 2 court judges, one still serving, Wilson Musene, and another, Moses Muchiri, who retired. Both served at the family court that is responsible for adoptions. 2 lawyers sanctioned alongside them, Dora Mirembe and her associate Patrick Echobu, are accused of facilitating these illegal adoptions through manipulation and falsification of court documents. Young children, mainly from vulnerable families, were taken under the promise of being given better education abroad. Under the sanctions, properties of the 4 individuals in the US will be seized. Individuals and companies that have interests in the US are also barred from doing business with them. Human rights lawyer Nicholas Opio said the sanctions are an indictment against the country's judicial processes towards children. The Minister of Gender, Frank Tumwebaze, said that the named individuals will be prosecuted if evidence against them can be sustained. Patricia Oyela, BBC News, Kampala.
That was Patricia Oyela there. You're watching Focus on Africa. Do stay with us because still to come, they've had some of the toughest coronavirus restrictions in the world, but they are 5th when it comes to cases. South Africa, though, is getting a bit of norm back. Welcome back. You're watching Focus on Africa, our breaking story, developing story. The events in Mali. It's been confirmed that the Prime Minister of Mali, Mr. Cisse, as well as the President, that's President Keita, have been arrested. There have been questions over the status of whether there is a mutiny or a coup taking place in the country. But that's all we have at the moment, that both leaders of the country have been arrested. More as and when we get it. Well, let's turn to events in South Africa. Now, the country has had some pretty tough coronavirus restrictions placed on it. We'll come to that story in a moment because it's a fascinating development in terms of how the country has reacted. But in terms of reaction, when you look at what's happened to students in the UK, I mean, they've had a tough time. Not only have they had to contend with school shutdowns, there's now outcry over their final year results. Now, they were calculated with an algorithm. The results initially were released with figures showing that nearly 40% of the predicted results were downgraded, meaning those students haven't been able to take up their university courses of their first choice. Now, yesterday, the government made a dramatic U-turn. They announced that pupils can now submit the assessments from their teachers. Well, what a time it has been. Joining me now on the line is one of those students. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. Jay Ferguson has joined us. Jay, just talk us through what the last few days, since last week in fact, has meant to you.
Sure. So the last few weeks have been really difficult in terms of students like me. We have been waiting our results and we finally got our results last Thursday. However, many of us were downgraded, as you said, 40%. Me personally, I was downgraded in 2 subjects. This has resulted in me not getting my first choice for university, hence me being in a bit of a panic over the past few days.
Okay, so
only recently, yeah.
Sorry, Jay. So when you heard that they said, OK, we're not going to take those results, because, I mean, it's devastating, isn't it, to know that you can't go to to university you want, and they announced that you can now go on those initial predicted grades. What went through your mind yesterday?
I guess it was a moment of surprise because we all needed that desperately. Many of my friends did. Many of people that I don't even know that well across the country did. We just thought that it was. In a sense, we knew it was coming because Scotland did the similar thing, then Northern Ireland, then Wales. So we kind of had a feeling that it was going to happen in England as well, which it did, and it was a massive sigh of relief for me because at least I'd got the grades that were most accurate of what I would have achieved. So it was really pleasing for me to hear.
Okay, so the algorithm results meant that you were going to lose your place to study. Can you just tell our viewers?
Yeah, so I was going to lose my first choice university, and I ended up in the past few days having an unsuccessful application because of that. However, the U-turn now, the changing grades from teachers predicted, has allowed me to contact my uni. So I'm just awaiting full confirmation from them that I will be able to study there. As of yet, I'm not too sure. I'm just waiting on confirmation for them. And I guess students around the country are also not too sure. But at least we have the grades that we deserve now.
Absolutely. So you're hoping to go to King's College London and you're studying science. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to study neuroscience.
Gosh. Oh, my goodness. Do you know what, Jay? On that note, huge congratulations and good luck with your future. Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
Thank you.
Neuroscience, eh? Goodness me. Well, despite the government U-turn over the algorithm results, there are still some pupils for which it's too late. They have lost that place. The universities can't give them their place back. So there's particular concern over pupils from disadvantaged and ethnic minority communities. In July, there was a warning. A parliamentary committee said that those pupils could face particular bias from the system used for calculating results. Earlier, I spoke to James Turner. Now, he's the CEO of the Sutton Trust. Now, they look at social mobility issues in the UK. And I started off by asking him, what is social mobility?
Well, we think of social mobility as meaning that every young person should have the same chances in life, the chances to follow their aspirations and talents, and that shouldn't depend on your background. Social mobility in the UK is low compared to other countries, particularly if you look at countries like in Europe, Scandinavian countries, social mobility is lower, which means in the UK, what you go on to do as an individual is more closely related to how much your parents earn than it is in many, many other countries.
The assumption is we have an equal access to education, certainly in the UK. So why, if you're from a disadvantaged background or if you're from an ethnic minority, why would you come out worse through this?
Well, in this particular circumstance, it was a quirk, a very potentially damaging quirk of the sort of modelling and the algorithm that had been used. So to determine whose scores were brought down in the sort of moderation process, that the idea that there should be some sort of standardisation across the country, and we shouldn't just rely on teachers' predictions and teachers' assessments. There was this model that was used, but that relied on historical data. That relied on not just an individual's performance, but how previous cohorts of that school had performed. So you got these people who were doing very well individually, but because of the school they were in, their results were brought down. And that was the big problem, I think, with what happened. Although in theory we have equal access to education in the UK, it is actually a very mixed picture. And we know that if you're low income, if you're from certain minority backgrounds, your experience of the education system is very different.
Now that we've had this U-turn, will it rectify the problems and the issues that were raised initially last week?
The danger is it just pushes the problem down the road, because last week, many university courses, particularly the most competitive university courses, filled up. They filled up with students who had got the grades on Thursday, and they filled their places. So what is going to happen now to students who've got higher grades? Are there going to be enough university places for them? The government has taken the cap off universities expanding, so some will be able to, but there's only a limit. There's a limit to the extent that universities can expand.
That was James Turner there. Now to South Africa, the country with the 5th highest total of COVID-19 cases in the world and highest, obviously, on the continent. However, in a recent dip in numbers and a desperate need to reopen the economy has led the country to scrap many of its lockdown restrictions. From Johannesburg, Vumani Mkhize looks at what has changed and how people are feeling about it.
South Africa has officially eased one of the world's toughest lockdowns. From today, we've moved from level 3 to level 2 of lockdown regulations. But practically, what does that mean? Well, the big headline is that alcohol and tobacco sales are now allowed again. Travel between provinces will also be allowed, and long-awaited family visits can take place too. International flights will not yet reopen though. Gym fanatics will breathe a sigh of relief as fitness centres have been granted permission to reopen. A maximum of 50 people are allowed at any time. The same rules apply to theatres and cinemas. Sports have also restarted, although spectators are not allowed in the stadium. For now, they'll be watching from home. The easing of restrictions comes off the back of a decline in infection rates. You can see here that the country appears to have hit its peak in the middle of July and has been gradually reducing since then. While the death rate is still significant, it's still nowhere near the sort of numbers that we've seen in places like the US, Brazil, and the UK. South Africa's official recovery rate is also looking promising. So what do people here make of the changes?
I think things are going to be much better because, you know, we are not working because of this lockdown.
It wasn't essential. I think it was a wise move, just in terms of trying to lift everybody up, just economically and emotionally a little bit. We need a little bit of positivity.
For those who are drinking, I mean, they must be responsible. I mean, it's still lockdown. This COVID-19 kills. I mean, I think people, they must be very careful about this thing. I mean, yes, things have been eased, but we have to be strictly careful about this COVID-19.
There seems to be a general optimism in the country, and these changes will alleviate pressure on an economy that's been reeling. The government has warned South Africans to continue to wear their masks, to wash their hands, and to maintain social distancing if they are to avoid a potentially bigger second wave of the virus.
OK, we're just going to remind you now of our breaking story here on Focus on Africa and BBC World News, and that is very significant developments taking place in Mali, in North Africa. There's been confirmation following reports earlier this morning that there had been some activity, some gunshots at a military barracks just outside of the capital, Bamako. And we've now got confirmation from the AP and Reuters news agency that the Prime Minister, that's Prime Minister Cisse, and the President, that's President Keita, have been arrested by the military. There had been some question mark as to whether this was a mutiny or a coup. It is now very hesitantly being referred to as a coup. Who is leading it, we are unsure. That's one of the things that we don't know, but we do know that there is a colonel who is leading these military figures. So what started this morning was how it's been reported, disgruntled junior officers drove towards the city centre. There have been some mass protests, though, against President Keita, primarily because of his handling of the security situation, a beleaguered economy, corruption, and also local elections. The public of Mali were not happy with those. So that's the latest. President and Prime Minister of Mali have both been arrested by the military. Stay with us, more coming up. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.